Commander Jake Morrison thought he'd seen it all during his 15 years with the Navy SEALs. He'd run operations across Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and plenty of other places that never made it into official paperwork. At 38, he'd become the youngest commander his unit had ever known, earning his reputation through razor-sharp instincts and an uncanny ability to spot talent others overlooked. Nothing could have prepared him for what he witnessed that morning at the remote base in eastern Afghanistan. Dawn was just beginning to paint the Hindu Kush Mountains when Jake took his usual early walk through the weapons area. The base lay quiet. Most personnel were either recovering from night patrols or gearing up for the day ahead. These morning walks gave Jake something valuable: a chance to assess his team's equipment and state of mind without the pressure of formal inspections. As he turned the corner near the armory building, he froze. Someone was already hard at work, completely focused on breaking down a Barrett M82A1 50 caliber sniper rifle. The enormous weapon lay spread across a maintenance table in perfectly organized pieces, each component positioned with surgical care. What grabbed Jake's attention wasn't just the early hour or the meticulous approach, it was who was doing the work. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez looked nothing like Hollywood's version of a military sniper. She stood barely 5'4" with weathered hands that moved across the weapon's parts like a concert pianist playing a beloved piece. Her dark hair was pulled into a regulation bun, and her desert camo showed the wear patterns of someone who lived in the field rather than behind a desk. Something almost zen-like characterized her movements, each one purposeful and efficient. Jake had arrived at the base just 3 days earlier with his SEAL team, assigned to conduct high-priority target operations in the region's deadliest valleys. The army unit already stationed there had been battling Taliban and ISIS-K forces for 8 grueling months, suffering casualties while making slow progress against an enemy intimately familiar with every cave and ridge. His team was meant to shift that dynamic through precision strikes and intelligence gathering. He'd received briefings on the base personnel, including the sniper teams providing overwatch for patrols and convoys. Elena's name had come up briefly as one of the designated marksmen, but the briefing had centered mainly on the male snipers holding traditional long-range positions. In Jake's experience, that usually meant the real talent was being ignored. Elena sensed someone watching and glanced up from her work. Her eyes were a piercing green against her sun-darkened face, holding the steady gaze that came from countless hours peering through rifle scopes. She didn't appear startled or self-conscious about being discovered working before sunrise. She simply nodded once and returned to her task. "Mind if I observe?" Jake asked, moving closer to the table. "It's a free country, sir," Elena replied without looking up. Her voice carried a faint Texas drawl, no attitude in her tone, just the straightforward response of someone confident in their skills. Jake watched as she started reassembling the Barrett. The 50 caliber rifle was a monster of a weapon, weighing close to 30 pounds, fully loaded and capable of punching through engine blocks from over a mile away. In skilled hands, it could change the entire outcome of a battle. Elena handled it like a natural extension of herself, each component clicking into place with barely audible precision. "How long have you worked with the Barrett?" he asked. 4 years, Elena answered, installing the bolt carrier group with practiced ease. Started on the M24 system during basic sniper school, progressed to the M2010, then got certified on this beauty roughly 6 months before deployment. Jake noticed something revealing about her technique. Most snipers he'd worked with treated their rifles with almost religious reverence, handling each piece like fragile crystal. Elena showed equal care, but also a functional familiarity suggesting countless hours of real-world use beyond training exercises. "Seen much action with it?" he pressed. Elena paused momentarily, her hands stilling on the rifle's receiver. "Some," she said quietly. "Enough to understand what it can accomplish when necessary." Something in her tone made Jake pay closer attention. He'd heard that same understated response from his top operators, the ones who'd experienced real combat but didn't feel compelled to broadcast it. The loudest voices usually belonged to those with the least to say. As Elena continued working, Jake found himself studying not just her technique, but her entire relationship with the weapon. She moved with the kind of muscle memory born from high-stress repetition, her fingers finding each component without conscious thought. When she inspected the rifle's optic mounts, she did so with the thoroughness of someone who understood that a loose scope could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. The Barrett was nearly reassembled when another soldier approached the maintenance area. Specialist Davis was one of the base's regular infantry troops, a kid from Ohio who couldn't be older than 21. He carried himself with the swagger young soldiers often adopted to mask their inexperience. "Morning, Vasquez," Davis said with a grin that didn't reach his eye. "Still playing with that oversized gun of yours?" Elena didn't respond right away, focusing instead on installing the rifle's muzzle brake. Jake noticed her jaw tighten slightly, though her hands remained rock steady. Got to keep it maintained, she said evenly. Never know when you might need to reach out and touch someone. Davis laughed, but there was an edge beneath it. Yeah, well maybe next time leave the long-range work to the guys. We've got actual experience with this stuff. The maintenance area went silent. Jake felt his own muscles tense, recognizing the kind of casual dismissal that could destroy unit cohesion. He was about to step in when Elena finally looked up from her work. Experience, she repeated slowly, as if testing the word. That's an interesting perspective, David. Something in her tone made the young soldier take a half-step back. Elena returned to her rifle, but Jake caught the slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. It was the expression of someone who possessed knowledge others didn't, and it made him intensely curious about Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez and her experience with the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. 2 days after the maintenance area encounter, Jake found himself in the base's Tactical Operations Center, reviewing intelligence reports when the radio crackled to life with an urgent transmission. A convoy returning from village patrol had been ambushed in Kamdesh Valley, taking heavy fire from elevated positions beyond the reach of standard infantry weapons. The convoy was trapped in a kill zone with wounded soldiers and no clear escape route. Phantom Base, this is Eagle 6, came the strained voice of Lieutenant Collins, the convoy commander. We're taking effective fire from multiple positions on the ridgeline, approximately 800 to 1,200 meters northeast of our position. Request immediate sniper support to neutralize elevated threats. Jake watched as the operations officer coordinated the response. 2 Apache helicopters were 15 minutes out, but the convoy couldn't last that long. The enemy had chosen their position expertly, a narrow valley with steep sides that funneled any rescue attempt directly through their kill zone. Sir, came a voice from across the operations center. Vasquez is already gearing up. She was monitoring the radio traffic. Eventually, the Americans would have to move, and when they did, they'd be exposed. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, in position and setting up. Beginning target identification through his binoculars, Jake could see the distant ridge where Elena had positioned herself. Even knowing where to look, he could barely make out the shadow of movement as she arranged her equipment. The observation post she'd chosen offered clear sightlines to the ambush site while providing natural concealment from counter-sniper fire. The operations center fell quiet as everyone focused on the radio traffic. Elena's voice came through calm and professional as she began calling out targets. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1. I have visual on 4 enemy positions on the ridgeline. Range to nearest target is 930 meters. Range to furthest target is 1,260 meters. All targets are in hard cover using natural rock formations. Major Peterson leaned over the radio. Overwatch 1, can you engage effectively at those ranges? Affirmative, Phantom Base. Targets are partially concealed, but I have adequate sightlines. Wind is steady at 4 to 6 miles per hour from the southwest. Atmospheric conditions are favorable. Jake listened to her technical assessment with growing admiration. Elena was treating this like a precision engineering problem, accounting for every variable that could affect her shots: distance, wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure, target movement pattern. She was processing all of it in real time while lying prone on a mountainside, with people's lives hanging in the balance. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1. I'm seeing muzzle flashes from the primary position. Engaging now. The radio went silent except for the steady background noise of stat. Jake found himself holding his breath as he waited for Elena's next transmission. At these ranges, even the best snipers needed time to line up their shots and account for complex ballistics. Then came the sound every infantry soldier recognized, the distinctive crack of a .50 caliber rifle echoing across the mountains, followed several seconds later by Elena's calm voice on the radio. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, target down. Engaging secondary position. The second shot came exactly 47 seconds after the first. Jake had been counting without realizing it, his military training automatically timing the engagement even as he listened to Elena's steady breathing over the radio. The crack of the Barrett echoed across the valley again, and this time the response was immediate. Eagle 6, Eagle 6, came Lieutenant Collins' excited voice from the convoy. Whatever you just did up there, keep doing it. We're seeing the enemy pulling back from the eastern position. Elena's voice cut through the chatter with professional calm. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, second target neutralized. Observing enemy movement patterns. They're repositioning to dead ground behind the ridge. Jake watched the tactical display as the situation began to shift. The enemy fighters who'd been confident in their elevated positions minutes before were now scrambling for cover. The psychological impact of accurate long-range fire was often as important as the physical casualty. Nothing destroyed a fighting position's effectiveness like knowing death could reach them from over a mile away. Overwatch 1, Phantom Base. Major Peterson called over the radio. Can you maintain observation on their fallback position? Negative on direct fire solutions to their current positions, Elena responded. But they're moving in a predictable pattern toward the northern ravine. If they continue on this heading, they'll expose themselves at a choke point approximately 1,400 meters from my position. Jake found himself leaning closer to the radio, fascinated by Elena's tactical awareness. She wasn't just shooting targets, she was reading the entire battlefield, predicting enemy movements and positioning herself to maintain the initiative. Eagle 6, Phantom Base. Major Peterson transmitted to the convoy. Begin moving toward the extraction point. Overwatch 1 will provide coverage during your movement. The convoy's movement was painfully slow with wounded soldiers and damaged vehicles. They couldn't simply race out of the kill zone. Instead, they had to execute a careful withdrawal that would expose them to fire from multiple angles. It was exactly the kind of complex tactical situation where a skilled sniper could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Elena's next transmission came as the convoy began to move. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1. I have movement in the northern ravine. Multiple targets moving through the choke point. Range is 1,380 meters. Requesting permission to engage. Targets confirmed as hostile? Peterson asked. Affirmative. Armed males moving in tactical formation toward positions that would allow them to engage the convoy during extraction. Jake could picture the scene from Elena's perspective. Through her high-powered scope, she'd be watching armed fighters moving through terrain they thought provided concealment from the convoy below. They had no idea someone was observing them from a completely different angle with the capability to reach out across more than a mile of empty air. Engage at your discretion, Overwatch 1. The third shot came after a longer pause. Jake realized Elena was dealing with moving targets now, which exponentially increased the difficulty of her task. At these ranges, she had to account not just for distance and wind, but also for the time it would take her bullet to travel to the target area and predict where her targets would be when it arrived. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, target down. Enemy formation is scattering. They're breaking contact and moving away from the convoy route. Lieutenant Collins's voice crackled over the radio with obvious relief. Phantom Base, Eagle 6, we're clear of the ambush site and moving toward the extraction point. Whatever angel you have watching over us up there, we owe them a case of beer. Jake smiled at the transmission, but his attention remained focused on Elena's position. She had successfully broken up the ambush and covered the convoy's withdrawal, but the mission wasn't over. In his experience, enemy fighters in this region rarely gave up after an initial setback. They would regroup and look for another opportunity to strike. His concerns proved justified when Elena's voice came over the radio again, this time with an edge of urgency that hadn't been there before. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1. I'm observing a secondary enemy force moving up the western approach, approximately 8 to 10 fighters with heavy weapons. They're positioning to ambush the convoy at the bridge crossing. Jake studied the tactical map and cursed under his breath. The bridge was the only way for the convoy to cross a deep ravine on their route back to base. If enemy forces controlled the high ground, overlooking that crossing, the convoy would be trapped in another kill zone, this time with nowhere to run. Range to the western positions, Peterson asked. Initial estimates put them at approximately 1,600 meters from my current position, Elena replied. But they're still moving. I need to reposition to get clear sightlines. Overwatch 1, the convoy will reach the bridge crossing in 15 minutes. How long do you need to get into position? There was a pause before Elena responded, and Jake could almost hear her running calculations in her head. Distance, terrain, time, ammunition remaining, all the factors that would determine whether she could provide effective support. I can reach an alternate position in 12 minutes, but it will put me at maximum effective range for the Barrett. We're talking about shots at the edge of what's possible with this system. Jake grabbed the radio handset. Overwatch 1, this is Commander Morris. What's your assessment of the tactical situation? Sir, the enemy is using classic ambush tactics. They're allowing the convoy to think they've escaped the first ambush, then positioning for a follow-up attack at a predictable choke point. If they establish positions overlooking the bridge, the convoy won't have anywhere to go. Can you stop them? Another pause, longer this time. Sir, I can try, but at those ranges with moving targets and limited time to set up, I can't guarantee clean kill. The best I might be able to do is disrupt their positioning and buy the convoy time to get across. Jake made a decision that went against every instinct he'd developed in 15 years of special operations. He was about to stake the lives of an entire convoy on the abilities of a soldier he'd met just days ago, based solely on his observation of her working on her rifle and 3 shots he'd listened to over the radio. Overwatch 1, you have authorization to reposition and engage as needed. The convoy's safety is your priority. Understood, Phantom Base. Moving to alternate position now. The radio went silent except for Elena's controlled breathing as she packed up her equipment and began moving across the mountainous terrain. Jake found himself studying her GPS beacon on the tactical display, watching as it traced a path across ridges and through valleys that would challenge even experienced mountain climbers. As he watched, Jake realized he was witnessing something exceptional. Elena Vasquez wasn't just a competent sniper, she was operating at a level few marksmen ever achieved. The precision of her shots, the speed of her tactical assessments, and her ability to predict enemy movements suggested experience and skill that went far beyond what her personnel file indicated. The convoy was 8 minutes from the bridge crossing when Elena's voice came over the radio again. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, in position, I have visual on the enemy force. Range to targets is 1,820 meters. They've established positions with clear sight lines to the bridge approach, 1,800 meters. Jake did the math in his head and felt a chill run down his spine. That was well over a mile, at the absolute limit of what even the Barrett 50 caliber could accomplish under ideal conditions. With mountain winds, atmospheric pressure changes, and the stress of combat, it was a shot most snipers would never attempt. Overwatch 1, Jake called over the radio, "You're under no obligation to take shots you're not confident in." Elena's response came without hesitation. "Sir, I'm confident in my abilities and my equipment, but you should know at this range I'll be shooting at the absolute edge of the Barrett's effective envelope. There are no guarantees." The convoy was now 5 minutes from the bridge. Jake's hands gripped the radio handset so tightly his knuckles had turned white. In the Tactical Operations Center, every person was focused on the unfolding situation, but the weight of command meant that ultimately the lives of those convoy soldiers rested on his decision. He had authorized Elena to attempt shots at a range that pushed beyond the theoretical limits of her weapon system, based on nothing more than instinct and a few minutes of observation. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, Elena's voice came through the radio with the same steady calm she'd maintained throughout the engagement. "I have the lead elements of the enemy force in my scope. They're setting up a PKM machine gun position that will have perfect coverage of the bridge approach. Range is 1,827 meters. The convoy was now 3 minutes from the bridge crossing. Through the tactical display, Jake could see Lieutenant Collins and his soldiers moving through the valley below, unaware that another ambush was being prepared for them just ahead. "Wind conditions?" Jake asked, knowing that at these extreme ranges even a slight change in wind speed or direction could send a bullet yards off target. "Variable winds from the northwest, estimated at 8 to 12 miles per hour. I'm seeing mirage patterns that indicate thermals rising from the valley floor. It's not ideal, but it's workable." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, running through the tactical situation one more time. The convoy had already taken casualties and couldn't afford another ambush. The Apache helicopters were still 10 minutes out, too late to help with the bridge crossing. Elena Vasquez, a staff sergeant he'd barely known existed a week ago, was their only option. Overwatch 1, you are clear to engage. Roger, Phantom Base, engaging the machine gun position. The Tactical Operations Center fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet, could sense the tension radiating from every person in the room. At 1,800 meters, even the most sophisticated rifles and optics were operating at their absolute limit. Bullet drop at that range meant Elena would have to aim nearly 15 feet above her target, and trust in physics and mathematics to bring the round down onto a human-sized target. The shot, when it came, seemed to echo across the mountains for an impossibly long time. The Barrett's distinctive boom rolled through valleys and bounced off rock faces, announcing to everyone within miles that someone was wielding serious firepower. Phantom Base, Overwatch 1, miss. The round impacted approximately 2 meters low and 1 meter left of target, adjusting for range and wind. Jake felt his stomach drop. A miss at this range wasn't unexpected. It was almost inevitable given the conditions. But the convoy was now just 2 minutes from the bridge, and the enemy machine gun crew would be alerted to the presence of a sniper. They would either relocate to better cover or accelerate their own preparations to engage the convoy. Overwatch 1, what's your assessment of enemy reaction? They're staying in position but moving faster to get their weapon system operation. I think they believe the shot came from much closer. They're scanning the wrong areas for threats. That was something at least. Elena's extreme range had worked in her favor by confusing the enemy about her location, but she still needed to make a precision shot under conditions that would challenge the world's best marksman. Second shot in 30 seconds, Elena transmitted, "I'm making adjustments based on the first round's impact." Jake found himself doing something he hadn't done since his first combat deployment. He was praying, not for himself, but for a soldier he barely knew who was attempting something that existed at the very edge of human capability. The second shot came exactly when Elena said it. This time, the silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever before her voice crackled over the radio. Phantom base, Overwatch 1, target neutralized. Machine gun position is down. The relief in the Tactical Operations Center was palpable, but Elena wasn't finished. I'm observing secondary targets moving to establish alternate firing positions. They're adapting faster than expected. Range to new positions is approximately 1900 meters. 1900 meters. Jake did the math and realized they were now talking about shots at nearly 1.2 miles, distances that belonged in record books, not combat operations. Even with the most advanced equipment available, hitting human-sized targets at that range required a combination of skill, luck, and perfect conditions that rarely aligned in the real world. Convoy status? Jake asked over the radio. Eagle 6, Phantom base. We're 1 minute from the bridge crossing. Whatever's happening up there, we need it to continue for just a little longer. Elena's voice came through the radio with an edge of concentration that hadn't been there before. Phantom base. I'm tracking 3 separate groups trying to establish overlapping fields of fire on the bridge. If they succeed in getting set up, they'll be able to engage the convoy from multiple angles simultaneously. Can you disrupt all 3 positions? Not simultaneously, but I might be able to create enough chaos to prevent them from coordinating their fire effectively. Jake made another command decision. Do whatever you can, Overwatch 1. The convoy's survival depends on it. What followed was a display of marksmanship Jake would remember for the rest of his career. Elena engaged the 3 enemy positions in rapid succession, firing rounds at ranges that pushed far beyond what military doctrine considered practical. Her shooting wasn't just about individual accuracy anymore. She was conducting a one-woman psychological warfare campaign, using the Barrett's massive 50 caliber rounds to create panic and confusion among enemy forces who couldn't locate or effectively return fire. First position disrupted, Elena reported after her 3rd shot. Moving to secondary target, 4th shot fired. Near miss on secondary position, but they're relocating away from the bridge approach. 5th shot, engaging the 3rd position. They're breaking contact and withdrawing from their firing positions. Lieutenant Collins's voice broke over the radio with obvious relief and excitement. Phantom base, Eagle 6. We're across the bridge and clear of the danger area. I don't know who your guardian angel is up there, but they just saved our lives. Jake grabbed the radio handset. Overwatch 1, convoy is clear. What's your status? Elena's response came after a longer pause than usual, and for the first time Jake could hear fatigue in her voice. Phantom base, Overwatch 1. I'm observing continued enemy withdrawal from the area. No immediate threats to the convoy route. I'm ready to begin my own extraction when you give the word. Negative, Overwatch 1. Hold position for another 15 minutes. The Apaches are inbound and will provide cover for your withdrawal. As Jake waited for Elena's response, he found himself thinking about what he'd just witnessed. In less than 40 minutes, Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had single-handedly broken up 2 separate ambushes, engaged targets at ranges most snipers would never attempt, and saved the lives of an entire convoy. She'd done it with a calmness and professionalism that suggested this level of performance was routine for her. But Jake was beginning to suspect that Elena Vasquez was anything but routine. The precision of her shooting, her tactical awareness, and her ability to operate effectively under extreme pressure suggested experience and training that went far beyond what a typical Army sniper received. When Elena finally returned to base 3 hours later, Jake was waiting for her in the Tactical Operations Center. She looked exhausted but alert, her equipment showing the wear of a long day in difficult terrain. As she began the routine process of checking in her rifle and reporting on ammunition expenditure, Jake approached her. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, "I think it's time we had a longer conversation about your background." Elena looked up from her equipment checklist, and for the first time since he'd met her, Jake saw something like weariness in her expression. "Sir, My personnel file contains all the relevant information about my training and experience. Jake studied her face carefully. Because what I witnessed today suggests capabilities that go well beyond standard Army sniper training. Elena set down her equipment and faced him directly. Commander Morrison, I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I do my job to the best of my ability. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else you need to know. But Jake was certain there was much more to know about Elena Vasquez. The question was whether she would tell him or if he would have to find out some other way. That evening, Jake found himself in the base commander's office, staring at Elena Vasquez's personnel file spread across the desk. Colonel Rebecca Martinez, the base commander, had agreed to let him review Elena's records after the successful convoy rescue. But what Jake was reading didn't match what he'd observed in the field. According to her official file, Elena had completed basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, advanced individual training as a military police officer, and had later cross-trained into the military occupational specialty of designated marksman. Her sniper school record showed excellent scores, but nothing that would indicate the exceptional capabilities Jake had witnessed. There are gaps, Jake said, looking up at Colonel Martinez. Her deployment history shows she's been in Afghanistan for 8 months, but there are periods where her location isn't specified, and her awards and commendations seem unusually sparse for someone with her apparent skill level. Colonel Martinez leaned back in her chair, studying Jake's expression. Commander Morrison, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Staff Sergeant Vasquez has training and experience that isn't reflected in this file. The shots she made today were at the absolute edge of what's possible with the Barrett system. That kind of capability doesn't develop overnight. Before Colonel Martinez could respond, there was a knock at the office door. Jake looked up to see Elena standing in the doorway, still wearing her field uniform but having cleaned off the dust and grime from her day on the mountain. Ma'am, you wanted to see me? Elena said, addressing the colonel. Come in, Staff Sergeant. Commander Morrison has some questions about your background. Elena entered the office and stood at attention, but Jake could see tension in her posture that hadn't been there during the combat operation. She was more nervous facing questions in an office than she'd been engaging enemy targets at extreme range. At ease, Colonel Martinez said, Elena, the commander is curious about your training background. Your performance today was exceptional, even by the standards we've come to expect from you. Elena's eyes flicked between Jake and the colonel. Ma'am, I received standard training at the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning. My instructors were excellent, and I worked hard to master the skills they taught. Jake set down the personnel file and leaned forward. Staff Sergeant, I've worked with graduates from every major sniper school in the military. What you did today goes beyond what any standard program teaches. The longest confirmed kill shot in Army history was made by a Special Forces sniper at 2,515 meters. You told me you had a confirmed kill at 3,247 meters. Elena remained silent, but Jake could see her jaw tighten slightly. More than that, Jake continued, your tactical awareness and ability to read battlefield conditions suggests experience with complex operations. You predicted enemy movements, adjusted your strategy in real time, and maintained communication discipline under extreme stress. That's not basic sniper training. That's advanced special operations training. Colonel Martinez looked at Elena with interest. Staff Sergeant, is there something about your background that isn't in your official file? Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could almost see her weighing her options. Finally, she looked directly at him and said, Sir, there are aspects of my training and experience that are classified above the level of my standard personnel file. Jake felt a surge of vindication. What kind of classified training? Before I was assigned to this unit, I spent 18 months attached to a joint special operations task force. My role was to provide precision sniper support for high-value target operations in areas where conventional forces couldn't operate effectively. Colonel Martinez sat up straighter. Which task force? Task Force Black, based out of Bagram but operating throughout the region. My official records show I was assigned to routine security operations during that period, but the actual missions were classified under Special Access Program. Jake knew about Task Force Black, though he'd never worked directly with them. They were one of the military's most secretive units, conducting operations that officially didn't exist. The snipers attached to such units would receive training and experience that went far beyond what conventional military programs offered. What kind of operations? Jake asked, his voice carefully neutral. Elena glanced at Colonel Martinez, who nodded slightly. High-value target elimination, sir. Counter-sniper operations against enemy marksmen who were disrupting conventional forces. Long-range reconnaissance in areas too dangerous for regular patrol. Most of my confirmed kills were made during those operations, including the 3,247-meter shot. Tell me about that shot. Yes, sir. The target was an enemy commander who'd been coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a compound considered untouchable by conventional assault. Intelligence indicated he would be visible for only a few minutes during a scheduled meeting, and the only position that offered a clear shot was over 2 miles away. Jake found himself leaning forward, fascinated despite himself. How many spotters confirmed the distance? 3, sir. 2 from my unit and 1 from CIA ground branch, who was conducting surveillance on the target. The shot was also recorded on multiple camera systems for intelligence analysis. Colonel Martinez looked troubled. Elena, why wasn't any of this reflected in your records when you were assigned to my unit? Ma'am, soldiers who complete tours with special access programs often have their records sanitized before reassignment to conventional units. It's a security measure to protect operational methods and prevent enemy intelligence from identifying personnel who participated in sensitive operations. Jake was beginning to understand. Elena Vasquez wasn't just an exceptionally skilled sniper, she was a veteran of some of the military's most classified operations, with experience and capabilities that had been deliberately hidden from her current chain of command. How many confirmed kills during your time with Task Force Black? Jake asked. Elena hesitated before answering. 47, sir. All at ranges exceeding 800 meters, with 32 of them beyond 1500 meters. The office fell silent. Jake had worked with some of the military's best snipers, and most career marksmen would be proud of half that number of confirmed kills over an entire career. Elena had achieved it in 18 months of classified operation. Why didn't you request assignment to a special operations unit after Task Force Black? Colonel Martinez asked. Ma'am, I requested assignment to conventional forces. After 18 months of high-intensity operations, I wanted to experience regular military service. I thought it would be a chance to use my skills in a more traditional role while serving with a standard Army unit. Jake understood that reasoning. Special operations could be emotionally and psychologically draining, and many elite soldiers eventually sought assignments that offered more routine deployments and normal military life. But you kept your capabilities sharp, Jake observed. The way you handled that Barrett today showed you haven't lost any of your edge. Sir, these skills require constant practice to maintain. I spend several hours each day training, even when we're not actively engaged in operation. That explained why Elena had been working on her rifle before dawn. She wasn't just maintaining her equipment, she was maintaining the precision and muscle memory that had made her one of the military's most effective snipers. Colonel Martinez stood up and walked to the window overlooking the base. Elena, I'm going to need to make some phone calls. Your actual background changes how I think about utilizing your capabilities. Ma'am, with respect, I'm happy to serve in my current role. I don't need special treatment or different assignments. Jake studied Elena's expression and realized she meant it. Despite her exceptional abilities and classified background, she seemed genuinely content, serving as a regular Army sniper. There was no ego or expectation of special recognition. Staff Sergeant, Jake said, I have a question that goes beyond your official duties. My SEAL team will be conducting operations in this region for the next several weeks. Some of those operations will require sniper support at extreme ranges in difficult conditions. Would you be interested in providing that support on a temporary assignment basis? Elena looked surprised by the offer. Sir, I'm not sure my chain of command would approve cross-service assignments. Colonel Martinez turned from the window. If Commander Morrison's operations can benefit from your capabilities, I think we can arrange something. Your performance today probably saved 8 lives. If you can provide similar support for special operations missions, it would be a valuable contribution to overall regional security. Jake could see Elena considering the offer. Working with Navy SEALs would mean returning to the kind of high-intensity operations she'd experienced with Task Force Black. But it would also mean using her abilities at their full potential rather than being limited to conventional Army missions. Commander Morrison, Elena said finally, what kind of ranges and conditions are we talking about? Jake smiled. The kind that would challenge even someone with your background, Staff Sergeant. The kind that require a shooter who can make impossible shots look routine. Elena was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. Sir, I'd be honored to support your operations. As Jake left the colonel's office that evening, he felt a sense of satisfaction. 3 weeks later, Jake found himself lying prone on a rocky outcrop at 4,200 feet elevation, watching Elena make final adjustments to her Barrett as they prepared for what would become the most challenging sniper operation of either of their careers. The target was a high-value terrorist leader who'd been coordinating attacks throughout the region from a heavily fortified compound in the Korangal Valley. Intelligence reports indicated the target would be visible for approximately 90 seconds during a scheduled meeting with subordinate commanders. The only position that offered a clear shot was from their current location, which put the target at a distance of 3,990 meters, nearly 2.4 miles away, far beyond what military doctrine considered possible for effective sniper fire. Atmospheric conditions are about as good as we're going to get, Elena said, studying her ballistic computer and range-finding equipment. Barometric pressure is stable, humidity is low, and wind conditions are relatively calm. Jake looked through his spotting scope at the target compound far below. Even with high-powered optics, the buildings looked impossibly small and distant. The idea that Elena could place a precision shot at that range seemed to defy physics. "What's your confidence level?" Jake asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, running calculations on her ballistic computer one final time. "Sir, at this range, there are so many variables that even perfect equipment and perfect conditions can't guarantee success. Bullet flight time will be approximately 5 seconds, which means any movement by the target during that window will result in a miss. But I've studied this target's behavioral patterns from surveillance footage. He's methodical in his movements, tends to stand in specific locations for predictable periods of time. If he follows his established patterns, there will be a window where he's stationary long enough for an engagement." Jake had spent the past 3 weeks working with Elena on increasingly challenging operations, and he'd developed complete confidence in her ability. She had successfully engaged targets at ranges other snipers would never attempt, always with the same calm professionalism she'd displayed during their first encounter. "Commander Morrison," came the voice of Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's communications specialist. "Drone surveillance confirms the target is beginning to move toward the meeting location. ETA to the engagement window is approximately 12 minutes. Elena began her final preparations, checking every component of her weapon system one last time. The Barrett was loaded with specially selected match-grade ammunition that had been individually inspected for consistency. Her rifle scope was calibrated to account for the extreme range and environmental conditions. Everything that technology and training could do to ensure success had been done." "Jake," Elena said, using his first name for the first time during their professional relationship, "I want you to know that regardless of the outcome today, working with your team has been the most professionally satisfying assignment of my career." Jake looked at her with surprise. "You sound like you're saying goodbye." "Not goodbye," Elena replied. "But after today, things are going to change. This shot, if successful, will establish a new world record for confirmed sniper kill. That kind of attention brings scrutiny that could compromise my ability to operate effectively in future assignments." Jake understood what she was saying. The military's most effective snipers often preferred to remain anonymous, operating in the shadows without public recognition. A record-breaking shot would make Elena famous within military circles, potentially ending her career as a covert operator. "Are you having second thoughts about taking the shot?" Elena shook her head. "This target has been responsible for dozens of attacks against coalition forces. Eliminating him will save lives. That's more important than my career concerns." Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radio earpieces. "Target is moving into the compound. Surveillance shows he's following his expected pattern." Elena settled behind her rifle, adjusting her position until she achieved perfect stability. At these extreme ranges, even tiny movements could send a bullet yards off target. Jake positioned himself with his spotting scope, ready to observe the shot and provide feedback. "Wind condition?" Jake asked. "Variable but manageable. I'm seeing consistent patterns in the mirage through my scope. Wind is approximately 6 to 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Range 3,890 meters confirmed by laser rangefinder." Jake did quick mental calculation. Even traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, Elena's bullet would take nearly 5 seconds to reach the target. During that time, gravity would pull it down over 200 feet, requiring Elena to aim at a point in the sky far above her target, and trust in physics to bring the round down onto a human-sized target nearly 2.4 miles away. "Target is entering the engagement area," Rodriguez reported. "Drone surveillance shows he's moving toward his usual position for meetings." Elena's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm Jake had observed during all their previous operations. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger as she tracked the target through her scope. "I have visual confirmation of the target," Elena reported. "He's moving toward the center of the compound courtyard following his established pattern." Jake watched through his spotting scope as a tiny figure moved across the distant compound. At this range, the target was barely visible even with their most powerful optics. "He's stopping," Elena said, taking position at the center of the courtyard. This is the engagement window. Jake held his breath as Elena made her final adjustments. Everything they'd trained for, all the calculations and preparations, came down to this moment. Shot fired, Elena announced. The crack of the Barrett echoed across the mountains, and Jake began counting seconds. At this range, they would have to wait nearly 5 full seconds before knowing whether the shot had found its target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rodriguez's excited voice broke the silence. Drone surveillance confirms target down. Target is down. Shot successful. Jake looked through his spotting scope and could barely make out movement in the distant compound as other figures rushed toward the location where the target had fallen. Elena remained motionless behind her rifle, continuing to observe the target area through her scope. Confirmed kill, she said quietly. Target eliminated. Jake realized he was shaking slightly from the adrenaline rush. He just witnessed the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, a shot that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible with current weapon systems. Elena, Jake said, that was extraordinary. You just made military history. Elena finally moved away from her rifle, but her expression was thoughtful rather than celebratory. Jake, I need you to understand something. This shot will be investigated and verified by multiple agents. My background with Task Force Black will likely become part of the official record. My days as a covert operator are probably over. Jake studied her face and realized she'd known this would happen when she agreed to take the shot. She had sacrificed her anonymity and future covert career to eliminate a target who posed a significant threat to coalition forces. What will you do now? Jake asked. Elena began packing her equipment with the same methodical care she'd shown during that first morning Jake had observed her. I suppose I'll go back to being a regular army sniper, maybe train other marksmen, share what I've learned with the next generation of snipers. As they prepared to leave their position, Jake realized that Elena Vasquez represented something special in the military community. She was a soldier who possessed extraordinary abilities, but approached them with humility and professionalism. She had achieved something that would be remembered in military history, but she viewed it simply as doing her job to the best of her ability. The shot at 3,890 meters would indeed establish Elena as the holder of the world's longest confirmed sniper kill, but Jake knew that the distance and technical achievement were less important than the character and dedication of the person who'd made it possible. Elena Vasquez was the kind of soldier that military legends were built around, even if she would have preferred to remain anonymous.